Everything old is new again in Washington. Lawmakers are scrambling as we speak to keep the government from shutting down at midnight. Alarmists are screaming how America will be completely vulnerable should that happen. Republicans are hammering away at Harry Reid for being the real roadblock here. Harry Reid and his side fire back the GOP can't get its act together and is using this to slam away at the president. Whew. Okay, someone may not get paid after tonight. Maybe that someone needs to be every single lawmaker in Washington. It's a pleasure to welcome back to Midpoint from politicalhype.com, political strategist Mariana Mancuso joins us here in the studio. Good to see you again.
Thanks for having me. It's
here we are,
back.
Just at a perfect time when everything's falling apart. You know,
exactly.
Dogs and cats living together, mass hysteria. That's all I keep hearing right now. Let's start with this interesting story here, because here's Gwen Graham, a congresswoman, who says that if the DHS does not get funded tonight, she will forego her salary and give it to charity. Okay, wait. I got to be honest with you here, because the skeptic in me goes, this is a PR stunt, isn't it?
You know, I have to agree with you. Well, I commend her for saying that, and I really hope she follows through. I think what's really important is to understand that she comes from a very, very tight race that she narrowly won in 2014, and now she's going to be up for re-election in 2016, so she has to do things that are keeping her above the fold, so to speak.
Well, it's nice to hear, but don't you think that the American people themselves are at a point right now where they're going, we've been through this before, we've been through this again, maybe you guys should go without being paid. I heard that actually mentioned to a congressman, and he said, well, I'm not too sure. But I think that's the attitude that the American people have. You guys don't care about us.
You know, I'd have to agree. I think right now the American people are fed up and they just want something to happen. They want something to get done. And right now, saying that you're going to forego your salary and give it to charity, that's great. Let's see that happen, and then let's see something be done. I think that's what's really important here. We need to find some type of funding that's going to happen before the clock runs out.
All right, so basically we're at a point right now, we're waiting for the House. The Senate has said, okay, here's a clean bill, no riders on it, everything's fine. We're waiting for the House to come up later on today. But this still seems to people like Harry Reid and the Democrats are just laughing because they gotcha. I mean, doesn't it seem that way, at least, that they really drove the Republicans into a hole and they're just having a good time at this?
It does. And, you know, I think right now where we're at in 2015, if this was February 2016, we would see something a lot different. I think right now that the Republicans have an opportunity to just bite the bullet, take the vote, and get it done and move on. And it's unfortunate. It is a gotcha moment in D.C., but we have to do something because we have to prove as Republicans that we're not going to have the same gridlock in Washington we had under a democratically controlled Congress.
But what about the people who say if you're going to be the Republicans, then you should have that gridlock because you should stop right here. Don't give in to the president. We don't actually at CPAC. There's a lot of people who say we don't care if DHS shuts down at midnight. So what about those people who are demanding that hard edge?
Are those the same people that aren't concerned if they get a paycheck?
Well, don't know. Are they?
Well, that's the problem, is that this is what this is about. We should not play political games with people's paychecks. And that's a problem. And Gwen Graham coming out and co-sponsoring a bill saying that people shouldn't be getting paid if DHS is not funded, that is political grandstanding, and she's playing political games with people who are actually using that money to pay and support for their families.
Then who's really playing the political games here, though? Honestly, I mean, who's the game master in all this?
Well, it looks like right now it's the Democrats. And it's the Republicans. Everybody in D.C. are just sitting here and pointing fingers, and nobody is doing anything. And by Gwen Graham saying that I'm going to go and I'm not going to, take a salary, I'm going to donate it to charity, that's her just using this as a limelight for her to be able to position herself for the appropriate way to win re-election in 2016. She won narrowly by less than 1%. Less than 3,000 votes, she beat an incumbent Tea Partier, Steve Sutherland, in Florida District 2. And now she has to make sure that she can win her re-election, and by doing that, she's doing things. We saw her vote for the Keystone Pipeline, which is not with the Democratic agenda. She voted against Nancy Pelosi. And so she's doing all of these things to prove that she's politically centric, and that's trying to position herself for the right way because she's already been targeted by the NRSC.
Whatever happens today, do you think this is going to harden Republican voters again against the Republicans and really drive them to go, you still didn't give us what we wanted? Or do you think they'll be satisfied?
No, I don't think they're going to be satisfied. But I think what's important is that the Republicans continue to toe the line, work together, and show Obama and the rest of the Democrats that they're not going to roll over.
You realize, of course, you just said Republicans work together, and that's one of the things that people are talking about. They can't even work together in their own party these days. That's the scary thing.
Well, I think it's going to be interesting what we're going to see when they come out of all of this. When we go into the presidential primaries, how are they going to work together?
Yeah, give them another chance. Why don't we do that? We're going to continue. We're going to give this discussion another chance. Plus, we are standing by waiting for Jeb Bush to take the stage at CPAC. We'll go live when that happens here on Midpoint. Welcome back to Midpoint. Republican strategist and founder of politicalhype.com, Mariana Mancuso, joins us here in the studio. We do want to point out to folks that we are still waiting for Jeb Bush at CPAC. He is taking his time at this point. He is kind of laid back a little bit. He's going to be a little late, but we will go live when Jeb Bush takes the stage. One person taking the stage yesterday, Marco Rubio. And Marco Rubio is somebody who has been downplayed a little bit. You can hear that from somebody, well, Marco's not really a contender at this point. But you believe that he is because of foreign policy, correct?
Yeah, I think he has an edge. He has an edge over the ability of the foreign policy knowledge that he's gained in the Senate. We saw him co-sponsor a bill with immigration in 2013, and he's done other things within foreign policy, and that really gives him a leg above, you know, Senator Rand Paul or Governor Walker, which are two people that he's been kind of meshed in together within the presidential contender.
Well, what happens then to Scott Walker then? Let's put it this way. If Marco Rubio is going to ascend to that throne, sooner or later, he is going to have to jump over Scott Walker. Look, everything that you read and hear about Scott Walker is he is now the darling. He's saying everything right, almost,
right,
except for a comment he made about the fact where he said, well, if I could handle the unions, I could handle ISIS, which somebody got all screamingly unhappy about. But it doesn't seem to people as if Marco Rubio has that push to get past Scott Walker. That Walker's just got that youthful sort of look and that stick it in the ear kind of attitude that people want. How could he get past him?
Well, you know, I'm not going to disagree. Walker wins. And, you know, at some point he needs to he just needs to put that on a bumper sticker and run with it until that fizzles out. Because he has won against the unions. He's done great things over in Wisconsin. But Marco Rubio has had the experience in the Senate, and he's had the foreign policy experience to deal with ISIS and to deal with the problems that we have that are creating, you know, on a daily basis as a result of the failure of the administration. And Walker doesn't have that experience. He's a governor from a state in the Midwest, and right now he has to do everything in his power to get the name ID and recognition that Marco Rubio already has as a United States Senator.
All right, now I'm going to ask about somebody else here when it comes down to all this, the gentleman that we're waiting for at this point, Jeb Bush. There was a thinking process earlier today, and a story came out that members of the Tea Party said when Jeb Bush comes up to speak, we are going to very nicely and respectfully, we're going to stand up and we're going to walk out because we don't want to hear him. Basically, they said because he's an old guy and we want a new face in there and we don't want a Bush in there anymore. Do you think this is just isolated, or do you think that this is a theme that's starting to work through some members of the Republican Party? Jeb may be there, but we need somebody fresh.
Well, I think that right now at CPAC you see a lot of grassroots people at CPAC, and it's a great convention, and if people haven't attended, I would highly encourage them to show up next year. I think that the people that are saying are going to walk out, you know, that's disruptive. He's there, he's doing an interview with Sean Hannity, and it's a very open style forum, and I think it's a chance for him to reintroduce himself to people that may have missed him. I mean, he's been out of the spotlight now for almost 7 years. The last time he was governor was in 2007, and so you're seeing that he's almost had a decade where he hasn't been in the limelight, and he has to reintroduce himself, his policies, what he stands for, and what he has as far as the country in mind.
But with him being out of the moonlight, listen to me, with him being out of the limelight for 10 years plus, though, if he comes up, tries to introduce himself, and you have people who are there right now who stand up and walk out, who say we don't want another Bush, doesn't that indicate that already he's being defeated in many ways? Even after 10 years, he can't get rid of the Bush name.
Well, of course you can't get rid of the Bush name, but if you compare that to the Obama name, I'm willing to bet that most people would take a Bush over an Obama any day, and I think that this is an isolated incident. I really do. I think that right now those grassroots people are angry, they want to be heard, and they want people such as Rand Paul or Ted Cruz to go out and really energize the base. At the end of the day, they're not going to be able to turn out the votes. Jeb Bush, he's very polarizing, and you have to respect that about him. People either love the Bush name or they hate the Bush name, but I'm telling you right now, if you ask someone, they're going to tell you where they stand. Whereas Ted Cruz or Rand Paul, people are going to be lukewarm either way. You're not going to have a polarizing ability the way that the Bush name does.
But the idea is, and for a guy like Ted Cruz, Rand Paul, some of them, not just those, but others, they're just a sort of spit and spout, aren't they? Kind of just generate that base and get people excited.
It's like a pep rally. They want to rally the base and energize everybody, but are those people going to turn out and vote? In 2012, Mitt Romney won the straw poll at CPAC. He didn't win the general election. Was that because the straw poll that announced him the winner didn't turn out and vote? If that's the case, then I don't want Jeb Bush winning the straw poll, and I want him to be the nominee, because then maybe people will turn out and vote.
You still like Scott Walker?
I like Scott Walker, I like Jeb Bush, I like what's going on in the Republican Party as far as presidential contenders.
Okay, good. We'll leave it at that. Marianne, always a pleasure to see you. Thanks so much for coming by. All right, third and final hour this week here on Midpoint on Deck. Which side will break and admit they are the ones who are at this moment driving America into a shutdown hole? That and so much more coming up when we continue on the only show that questions everything. This is Midpoint.